A lot of us have grown up watching shows like Drake and Josh, Victorious, iCarly, Zoe 101, and the one man behind it all was screenwriter and producer Dan Schneider. Now, Dan Schneider had a lot of ethical red flags, and a lot of them Nickelodeon chose to ignore. So this isn't just a scandal about one man, but this is rather an ethical, moral case study about Nickelodeon trying to keep some very bad things under wraps. So let's get into it. So Dan Schneider created every major Nickelodeon show between the years of 1998 and 2018. And over time, after many actor complaints and reports, even fans started to have some backlash, and they're noticing of certain particular patterns that definitely raise suspicions. One of which was Dan Schneider's weird involvement and obsession with feet in his shows. A lot of scripts that he wrote involved zooming in on a lot of the actors' feet, weird things like licking, putting food on them, tickling, things that recurred a little too frequently for comfort. And there's also been reports of verbal abuse to the cast members. One main example was Jeanette McCurdy. Jeanette McCurdy plays Sam on iCarly, and she wrote a book and described alluding to a higher-up in Nickelodeon, who's a producer, who enforced her to drink as a minor and controlled her image, which this was highly believed to be Dan Schneider, as he was the main admin working with Jeanette. So this case isn't just about one man's behavior. This is about the company that benefited off of this unethical behavior. So let's analyze it through a few ethical lenses. One main ethical theory is deontology. Deontology says that people aren't means to an end, people are ends within themselves, and they are not tools. However, Nickelodeon did violate this when they used child actors for profit while turning a blind eye to the children's safety. By allowing these coercive environments that have been described by many people and silencing the internal complaints, this actually desecrates the dignity of the actors working in this environment, and it gives them very little respect, showing that their opinions, their thoughts, their complaints don't matter. And it wasn't until the viewers watching it started to worry that that would be what would impact their sales, and they decided to finally take action once the viewers, and aka their clients, got involved and they were the ones complaining. Another example is virtue ethics, which was made famous by Aristotle. Now, a virtuous organization would one that shows signs of cultivating honesty, integrity, motivation, inspiration, all these kinds of things. Instead, Nickelodeon purely exhibited cowardice. A third ethical theory that you could look into is utilitarianism, which was made famous by John Stuart Mill. One might argue that Schneider's shows brought joy to millions, having a net positive utility. But that whole calculus collapses when the well-being of children is being sacrificed for mass entertainment. Utility at the cost of exploitation isn't ethical. It's simply negligence disguised as success. While no formal charges were filed, these actions raise four main ethical and legal flags. The one is the exploitation of minors in workplace setting. Number two is emotional coercion or implied retaliation. There could have been a possible quid pro quo. The third reason is cover-ups or non-disclosures through NDAs, possibly bordering on ideas like blackmail through silence. Basically, an actor might not get a certain role, or contracts might be denied, or jobs might be taken away, depending on what they would or wouldn't do with Dan Schneider. And the fourth and final reason is retaliatory contracts, the idea of controlling image and behavior of young actors. So now looking at the company response. After an internal investigation of checking facts and affidavits, Viacom CBS decided to terminate their contract with Dan Schneider in 2018, although none of the facts and evidence of the case have ever come to light. Now to move on to some final ideas of what could have been done, some of which could have been commissioning a public ethics audit. A lot of people, if they have nothing to hide, they will conduct something like this to show to the public that nothing wrong has been done and it's simply a misunderstanding. However, it does raise even more suspicions that they did not indulge in this common precedent in situations like these. Another one is creating whistleblower protections, where a lot of times people don't want to face ramifications for bringing some very unfortunate truths out to the public. However, nothing like this was ever done. Nickelodeon said that they would ever give protections to people who would expose the truth, very likely because they didn't want the truth to come out, and as we see throughout this whole pattern, they wanted to internalize it as much as possible. Dan Schneider might have been the main face or the main catalyst of these ethical problems, but the main burden and the lack of moral integrity falls onto Nickelodeon for allowing this to happen knowingly and not addressing it. Nickelodeon had the power, the knowledge, and the moral duty to intervene on these dangerous situations among kids, and they chose not to. But ethics isn't simply about avoiding scandal. It's about choosing accountability before you're forced to, and Nickelodeon failed to do that.